Today's episode is brought to you by Forvis Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Why do we make the choices that we do? And how malleable are we to persuasion, to buy, or to do something in particular? Behavioural science is the study of decision-making. It tries to make sense of our choices. It's an important discipline that can be woven into every element of business, says behavioural specialist Bri Williams. The problem, she says, is that behavioural science is terribly misunderstood. She explains why shortly. First, Chris Ashmore asks Bri if she has an example of behavioural science that businesses use.
Behavioural science is really the study of decision-making behaviour, so what influences people to do what they do. And this can be woven into every element of business, because when you think about business, everything on a day-to-day basis is about moving people from what they're currently doing to what we would like them to do. So with customers, it's they're not buying and we'd like them to buy, or not clicking on our website and we want them to click. And with staff, it might be they're not replying to my email, I want them to reply to my email. So behavioural science helps us understand and influence the behavioural decisions people are making.
Mm-hmm. Any examples of behavioural science that businesses use that we would be familiar with?
It's an interesting one because once your eyes are open to behavioural science, you'll see it everywhere. So pricing is a classic. When Steve Jobs first announced the iPad, way back when, we didn't know what an iPad was. Was it a laptop? No. Was it a mobile phone? No. So how on earth do we as consumers understand what should it be priced at? What is the value of that? So Steve Jobs, when he was announcing the iPad, he starts with pundits say the iPad would be $999. But I'm excited to tell you the iPad is only $499. Cue applause, rapture. People have just saved $500. Now, this is the psychological principle of anchoring. Steve Jobs masterfully crafted a context in which we understood that we were getting a great deal. He could have started that whole presentation by just saying, the iPad is $499, in which case people would have been left asking, is that a good price or not? So whenever you're in a retail environment, you'll walk around and you'll see this jacket was $500 and now it's only $350. I just feel like I've saved $150. Anchoring, so always providing context to a number, a price. So when a tradie comes to your house and says, Bri, look, it looks like about $20,000 of work, you wouldn't really understand whether that's expensive or not. But if that same tradie instead said, look, a job down the road came in about $27,000, but for you, I think we can bring it in about $20,000, well, suddenly it feels like I'm a winner. So anchoring is going to be key, and you will see it a lot in business. Another example, whenever you're, for instance, selecting shipping options when you want something posted to you, a business will often default one shipping option over another. That is due to our default bias. We tend to leave things as they are. So a smart business will make sure the default, the selection that they've pre-selected for us, is the one that they want to sell the most of. So default bias. And a third one is social norms. Often you'll see, for instance, in advertising, 9 out of 10 Australians like this, or 10,000 Australians have done that. That's normalising a behaviour, signalling to us that, hey, this is a really popular thing and you should get on board. So behavioural science, we see it all around, but it's really about now identifying those principles and deploying them in your business more deliberately.
Well, they're great examples, but are there any myths or misunderstandings about behavioural science that just don't go away?
There are classics. So one of them is that money motivates people. It's very easy for us to say, yes, if a staff member isn't performing, I just need to give them more money because that is what they are asking for, or I'll make sure that they're paid a bonus. We do that, and guess what? Their performance doesn't shift. So one of the big misconceptions about how people respond best to performance is throw money at the problem. And it's alluring because we think that it's unequivocal, and if people give us money, then we have the freedom to do whatever we want with that bonus check. But it's also impersonal, it's transactional, and it erodes the social reciprocity of intrinsic motivation. In other words, I want to work hard because I want to work hard for this business. Instead, it becomes very transactional. Now, I will say that does not mean that you should not pay your people well. We're really talking about incentives on top of a level of income that people are comfortable with. So that's myth number one. There's another myth, which is if people know better, they will do better. Now, we see a lot of information campaigns rolled out. For instance, we know that we should save for retirement, but if just the information was you should save for your retirement because you're going to have a shortfall, it might not be enough to change people's behaviour in that direction. Hence us having mandatory superannuation in Australia. We know what we should do, but it doesn't mean we'll do it. So often a myth is if we just give people the information, that will be enough to change their behaviour, and that's just not the case. You want me to go on? There are many more myths, Chris.
Give me another one. Give me one more.
One that I found really surprising, because often, again, if we're talking about performance, is that having a specific goal is best. We hear a lot about SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So the more detail we put into a performance goal, the more likely we are to adhere to it. And that is not the case. In fact, if we make a goal abstract, we have more chance of doing it. Why? Because if we make something very concrete, like my goal is to go to the gym 5 times a week, that becomes a chore. We become bored by that. Instead, if we have a more abstract goal, which is I want to improve or look after my fitness, well, there are many more paths that are open to us in order to achieve that goal. I was really surprised by this. It's some research done by Eilert Fishbach, who's written a book called Get It Done. So if people want more information about that, I'd really suggest that book.
Does it say anything about writing goals down or writing things down? If you write it down, you'll tend to get it done?
Certainly you can still write it down, but more in an abstract way. So the way you express the goal can be more an abstraction rather than being very precise.
Paint a picture.
Paint a picture. I'm very much about if you don't write it down, it won't get done. Not everyone is like that, of course, but it means that you are committed. You pre-commit your future self to a behaviour. So if I see in my diary that I need to, for instance, make X number of sales calls on a Wednesday, then I'm going to be more likely to do that.
All of these examples, does it sort of illustrate the point that we're not particularly rational, us humans, and that when it comes to enticing people to buy, throw that assumption out the window?
That is the biggest myth of all, that we are rational decision makers. And it's compelling because we spend our days explaining to ourselves and others why we've done something or why we're going to do something. So it feels very rational because it's justifiable, it seems logical. But the thing around logic is that it's retrospective. In other words, we make sense of our behaviour in hindsight. We look back and then we join the dots. But it's also hypothetical. So if we're forecasting what we're going to do in the future, it's a hypothetical, like New Year's resolutions. I'll definitely do that. And then the New Year's resolution falls away. So in business, if we are developing for instance, our pricing or our products based on logic and rationality, that can set us up for failure. As we described with the anchoring principle, Steve Jobs talked about $499 in the context of it being a saving from $999. He wasn't relying on logic or rationality, because logic or rationality would tell us it's $499 and it always was $499. He's fabricated this context. But emotionally, we've engaged in the fact that this is a great deal. So instead of relying on and assuming that people are going to look at something from a rational perspective, we need to look at how are we emotionally engaging them in this decision.
That was behavioural specialist Bri Williams. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily Podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Forvis Mazars. To find out more, visit forvismazars.com/au. That's FORVISMAZARS.com/au.